Hello, truth seekers and researchers. I'd like to share with you the reasons I personally believe that the coronavirus scare is nothing more than an economic strategy to put many more people and businesses and in fact countries into debt. It's one big global insurance scam. That's my belief, and I'm going to share just a few pieces of information that are freely available to anyone who wishes to do their own research. From research into the average mortality rate and what people die of, and those comparing those figures to the figures we are presented with on the news on a daily basis about the number of people that have allegedly become infected with COVID-19 or have died from COVID-19. The mortality rate isn't changing. It's no different to how it usually is. About 95% of the people that are said to have come down with the virus will recover. We're never really given much information about those who don't recover, but we can see that for the most part those are individuals who were maybe old or had lots of diseases anyway. They were very sick people, and frankly, most of the time when someone dies of old age, it's from something similar to pneumonia. The lungs stop working and you die. So there's nothing new here. So in terms of labeling these symptoms that most people have when they pass away from old age or frailty as COVID-19, we now have reports of these people dying from COVID-19, but nothing has changed. There isn't a pandemic or epidemic. Nothing is spreading from person to person. People are getting sick. Most people recover from what's essentially no different to a common cold or a flu. So that's that. It depends how the numbers are put across in the media. And once something has been labelled, a very broad spectrum set of symptoms are labelled as COVID-19, then you can guarantee that most of the population will get infected, as they say, by COVID-19, or will at least display COVID-19 type symptoms from a common cold or flu, which every single one of us is prone to. And whether you believe that's something that is spread through touching or breathing is something else that individuals need to do their own research on, to get their own knowledge on what pathogens and germs and symptoms and the body's reaction to certain things actually are, and how they've been defined by the medical industry. So of course this whole thing has wide sweeping economic effects all over the place, and of course right now the members of parliament in the UK, and I suppose many governments all over the world are discussing how they can help their own citizens and what they can do as preventive measures and what they're going to do as rescue packages to help the citizens that are in trouble because of the forced closure of most commerce. And of course what we have in place are loan schemes, and many businesses having been forced to close, still with bills to pay, employees and rent and what have you to pay. They are desperate to get their hands on these loans. And we see here, this is an article back it was updated on March the 18th, which is quite a few days away. It's the 24th now, so things will have changed since this one. But it's an interesting article. Britain's 350 billion business package the big winners and the sectors that desperately need more. So this is obviously, this came out during the build-up. Britain's bumper 350 billion package to support businesses will be a huge boost in these unprecedented times, but the Chancellor may soon need to come back with more. This phrase, promise to do whatever it takes, we're seeing that a lot. And ultimately, if you read through this article, you've basically got businesses that are now being told they can take out loans of up to 1.2 million to loans of up to 5 million. That's really your SMEs. For the big guys, the big players, there are different arrangements in place. So this article then talks about how the stock markets have been up and down with this fear of a coronavirus and the threat of closures and the threat of business being crippled for a very long time. And what we basically have are these rises and falls in the shares, which the stock market players or managers can affect and create the rises and falls that they would like to see. And it all is based on fear. But this is just on a national level in the UK. If we go to an international level, what we have here is something that was launched by the World Bank just a couple of years ago. It is the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, and it is basically an insurance scheme for countries. And there is the option to get a cash payout or get insurance. And the idea of this scheme is it is something that, like any insurance package, a certain damage has to be done in order to be able to claim insurance. For example, with flooding recently in the UK, a lot of people realised that flooding wasn't included on their insurance. So while people are paying into these insurance schemes, the coverage offered is usually not going to cover catastrophic events or loss due to flooding and what have you. These are things that you pay an extra premium for. So on a personal or private level it works like that, but it also works in the same way on a national or international level, where a country must reach certain criteria and should actually be experiencing an outbreak, and that's based on or a pandemic, and that's based on certain numbers of infections and what have you. It's quite, it's obviously quite in depth, but essentially what you're talking about here is the private investors in this scheme benefiting, and of course on a national level, a country could take one of two routes. They could invest in the insurance scheme and get nothing in return, or they could create the appearance of a pandemic and make an insurance claim based on their numbers. If we just have a closer look at this, so here we go, insurance paid in or cash into this pandemic emergency financing facility. The country gets a disease or an outbreak, and if the insurance criteria is satisfied, then a request for funds is made by that particular government, and an amount in predetermined, difficult to read that, based on publicly available data. So basically they will take publicly available data from, for example, say the World Health Organization. That would be the body which would provide reliable data, and it would be those figures that determined whether an insurance payout was given. So you can rest assured that for the most part, and especially given the so-called preventative measures that have come in at the moment, there won't be a pandemic. There won't be an outbreak because there isn't one in the first place. And of course it's all been very well controlled. So there's an insurance scheme there which people have paid into and is very unlikely to pay out. For probably a clearer summary of what's going on here, you can look at Wikipedia. So the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, PEF, is a controversial financing mechanism intended to assist governments and aid agencies with the management of a pandemic outbreak. It is provided by the World Bank, which raised the majority of the money by issuing 320 million in bonds and 105 million in swaps to private investors, which can be seen as a type of catastrophe bond, or catastrophe bond, however you'd like to say that. Additional funding was provided by approximately 190 million in donations from 3 countries and the World Bank's International Development Association. Jim Yong Kim, the president of the World Bank at the time the bonds were issued, described the program as leveraging our capital market expertise to serve the world's poorest people. Okay, so it's always been the case, isn't it? We're going to help the poor people, and that's whole mantra has now come down to what the government says it's doing. It's helping everyone, and of course we are to self-isolate, to help each other and do our bit for the community, help those poor aged people who might get a cold and die. That's basically the fight or flight mechanism that is being pushed. The button that's being pushed at the moment on the general public by the mass media fear mongering. So here we go. We can just read on. Bonds, a total of 330 million of bonds were sold to private investors in June 2017 with a maturity date of July 15th, 2020. Okay, so this is all going to obviously gather pace until then, and this is why we're being told that we're going to have these restrictions in place possibly until the summer. And it just so happens that these particular bonds for this package implemented 2 years ago by the PEF, by the World Bank, will mature for these private investors, although it can be extended by 1 year. The bond pays annual interest at rates ranging from 6.5 to 11.1% above LIBOR. The interest paid is funded by the governments of Germany and Japan. The bonds were issued in 2 classes. Class A, of which 225 million was issued, only applies to pandemic, flu and coronavirus, and is subject to a higher threshold of deaths before money will be paid out, making it a lower risk. Class B, 95 million issued, has a higher risk. Okay, so again, it's all about hedge funding and risk management and what have you, juggling these things to see whether we get a certain number of deaths before a payout is made. The bonds are intended to transfer pandemic risk away from developing countries and reimburse them while an outbreak is taking place. This differs from traditional reinsurance, which pays out after an event has happened in order to replenish insurers' capital. So that basically, again, what's happening is the fear of an outbreak will encourage people to make a claim on the insurance, or it's all smoke and mirrors. Basically, it's all prodding people and governments with sticks to make them react in a certain way, and then the results will be obviously beneficial for those private investors in these bonds that are supposed to help destitute nations in times of crisis. and basically put them into debt. So when a qualifying when a qualifying pandemic occurs, the invested capital can be paid out to affected countries rather than being returned to investors. Among the parameters governing whether or not the bond is triggered are the number of IBRD or IDA countries affected. I'm honestly not sure what that means. The number of cases in each of those countries, the number of deaths, the percentage of confirmed cases of total cases, including suspected, and the growth rate of cases. The conditions to trigger the bond must be in place for at least 12 weeks after the designated start of the event for payouts to happen. After that, they must be in place on a rolling 12-week basis. Okay, again, it's all about the timing. And these figures, this is why we're being constantly given these figures of, so, people that have been infected, people, and it's more focused on the people that have died rather than the people that have survived. What is, again, not really necessarily a specific virus, but a collection of symptoms that are the same as any cold or flu or pneumonia. Yeah. So as of March 2020, the Class A bonds were trading at a discount of 20 to 25%, and the Class B bonds were trading at a discount of 95%, reflecting the high risk that payouts will be triggered as a result of the 2019-20 coronavirus outbreak. In 2019, the World Bank indicated that they were planning on continuing the PEF program by issuing a new set of bonds starting May 2020. All right, the dates are there. They're telling you when these things will mature, when new things will be put into place, and this is all this fear mongering is all about. I'm absolutely sure of it. It is an economical. It's an economic trigger to have certain things, put people in debt. It's as simple as that. People and the country goes into debt. The country puts the people in debt. Yeah, and it's all done on this amazingly clever model of not having to force people, but just to ask them to go along with consensus for the good of the nation. Yeah. So the insurance window. The insurance window is backed by the bonds sold and can pay out a total of 425 million. It has more stringent criteria required to trigger a payout than a cash window. The insurance window covers diseases caused by pandemic flu, filovirus, coronavirus, Rift Valley fever, etc. Okay, so the coronavirus is quite a hefty one. There we go, 195.83 million. Ranks higher than that one, and then of course next we've got pandemic flu. So the cash window is a short-term cash injection backed by donated funds. It is governed by a steering body of countries which contributed the donations. The cash window has a capacity to pay up to 64 million, although this may fluctuate based on the funds already issued and donations received. It provides coverage of all the pathogens covered by the insurance window, as well as new pathogens which are not already epidemically transmitted. Yeah, now here's some criticism of it that has been put into this wiki article. The PEF has been widely criticised for providing generous returns to investors while making it too difficult to access funding during disease outbreaks, especially during the early stages of an outbreak when swift action is crucial. It was described by the former World Bank chief economist Lawrence Summers as an embarrassing mistake. Critics argue that the money spent on the PEF could be better used for increasing surveillance, diagnostics and response capabilities for outbreaks. Again, just disinformation, distraction there really, because there isn't an outbreak. There never has been. There's just the fear of an outbreak. Just like we buy insurance because we fear that we'll lose everything if the house catches fire. Yeah, so it's all fear-based. It's all what if, and of course you're led to believe that you must have it because you can't, lose, and it wouldn't be fair on other people. So everyone ends up contributing based on the fear of something that might happen. That's all you need to introduce insurance. And of course, the rarer the risk, the higher the insurance, and they just make it very, very difficult. We all know this from our own experience, that it's very, very difficult to have the right conditions to get a payout from insurance. But of course, they're taking money off everyone, so paying out a few thousand or a few million here or there means nothing to the big pot of money that has been collected and is used in order to furnish, to create debt, to generate interest, make more money. Yeah. So we'll go over the Kivu, Ebola, and then we've got this one, the coronavirus outbreak. During the 29-20 coronavirus outbreak, the PEF again came under criticism for having terms which were too stringent. The first tranche of money was not eligible to be released until 12 weeks after the start of the outbreak, despite the other conditions being satisfied, which prevented the money from being used to contain the disease during the crucial early stages. Yeah, so again, just you can take this information and compare it to the news reports we are being given, and just look at the situation that people are being put into because of this fear. And it really is, people are going to be put into debt. It's as simple as that. It is another 10, 20 years of debt slavery that's being put upon countries, and those countries will put it upon their citizens, and the companies, the small companies, the independent companies. So they will go into debt, and maybe they won't be able to pay those debts. They will get gobbled up and bought up by the big players, and so we'll have these umbrella companies on a worldwide level controlling everything we buy, every shop we go to. I mean, even in the UK here, for example, compared to Thailand, where I usually live, where you can get a coffee from any number of independent vendors on the street. Here, if you want to go and get a coffee, there are two places to choose from: Costa and Starbucks. That's it. Really, sure, small places sell coffees and what have you, but those small places are now out of business. They feel they are being forced into a position to get these loans, and they will be indebted, and likely many of them will be bought out by the larger companies if they have become in any way established or have any value to them. So it's as simple as that, really. So there you go. Everything's being ramped up until around May, June, when these bonds in this worldwide insurance scheme by the World Bank, the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, matures, and everything will go back to normal. So until then, just enjoy being an observer of the madness and the pantomime. Grow your own food, hang out with the family, and watch as the world goes by. Thank you very much.